killing me, which is annoying. Might do that. I'm still going to do the edited down version for Odyssey, so I guess I'll have to do it that way. Okay, last minute. Oh no, I think we are live. I think it actually finally all worked out. It says it's live on Restream. It says it's live on YouTube. Gonna wait for the picture to come up before we start. See, this is why like all of the bigger streams, all the big streams have a different guy doing the technical side. I need a Jamie. Jamie, pull that up. Exactly. Okay, let's see how this worked this time. Because it worked well in all my tests. I was streaming to both. Okay, yeah, we're all good. All right, hello chat. I can hear you, Danny, but I can't hear the other individual. That's because I've got you muted. So I'm muted now. Say something, Jeremy.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I will keep an eye on the chat to see if that is ready, but good morning, everyone. I'm sorry about the false start just before. I'm going to go ahead and tweet out this link before we jump into everything on the Twitter. That's done. Now, today we're speaking with Jeremy Kaufman, the man behind Odyssey and Library, and most recently, the man who has been making waves with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter account. There have been some controversial tweets, so I'm just going to start off by hitting him with them and just going from there. So, fire Fauci doesn't go nearly far enough. Arrest and try Fauci for crimes against humanity. Abolish the FDA. Abolish the CDC. Legalize machine guns, fighter planes, attack helicopters and battleships. Citizens must have a fighting capacity equivalent to the government in order to resist tyranny. All Republicans want to do about wokeness is wine. Libertarians have solutions. Repeal the Civil Rights Act. Eliminate disparate impact regulations. End affirmative action. And cease federal and state school funding. So, and let's not forget legalize child labor. Children will learn more on a job site than in public school. So that's the sort of thing that we'll be talking about today. Let's try this all again. Hi there, Jeremy. Thanks for coming. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, Danny. It's great to be here with you. Yeah, I mean, I think that so there's an aspect to a couple of those that is sort of designed to be provocative. Obviously, Fauci should go through a trial before he suffers any sort of criminal sanction. But I think at the heart of this debate is definitely something that's sort of been brewing in the Libertarian Party, for some time, which is, do you want the Libertarian Party to be a voice of the libertarian philosophy? Which to me is a beautiful thing that says if we put private property and voluntary association first, you get all kinds of really great outcomes, right? And it's also the morally right thing to do. And this is what, to me, and this is any libertarian philosopher. This isn't even like, some certain school of libertarian philosophy, right? Like, there's nothing in those tweets that either Murray Rothbard or David Friedman or any of them would disagree with. Nothing, right? Now, if you want the Libertarian Party to sort of be the Republican Party light, like the taxes we want taxes to be even lower than the Republicans. Instead of 37%, it should be 20%, and you can have legal weed. So and there's no sort of underlying philosophy that undergirds that. And that's sort of the Gary Johnson school of liberty, which
Right.
is like I'm a Republican, but I have a couple of Democratic positions.
And
I mean,
Gary Johnson, Gary Johnson will be jumping into in a moment.
Yeah. I mean, that is not why I'm a libertarian. I mean, the Libertarian Party has been, quite frankly, embarrassing the libertarian school of philosophy for years. I think that should end. Right. And I think that, libertarians who understand the philosophy should be taking this time to explain it, to explain why, to explain why these are the right things.
Yeah.
And we have to find ways of getting ourselves into the conversation and introducing these ideas. Otherwise, you're just going to be ignored. Like as far as I'm concerned, like let her speak was like kind of an embarrassment last year. Trying to
Yes.
get Joe's ideas out there, like begging for attention. Just say things that
Absolutely.
they can't ignore, right? And I think that really what this gets to the heart of the sort of the debates between the two schools of like that I don't like the two names like pragmatist versus Mises or whatever. I mean, I think it's really about like, do you want to hide some of your beliefs and potentially get more votes, or do you want to be unequivocal about your beliefs? And I'm not even accepting that you get more votes, but it's clear that like there are people who have become libertarians who have no idea, right? No idea what we actually believe.
Yeah,
And I think there are some libertarians who are also embarrassed by what they believe. They're embarrassed
that's
by it,
true.
and they want to hide it.
Okay,
Uh,
so I mean, I want to start off with before we jump into some of these and start seeing if we can dive in a little deeper into each one. I just want everyone to realize how much of impact these have had. So if you can just do you see Stream Chat as the channel
yeah,
there, Jeremy? If you jump into there, first of all, I want everyone to realize this is the verified Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter account that we're talking about making these tweets. This is the one that I first want to jump into because it has had some interesting results. Legalized child labor. Children will learn more on a job site than in public school. It has resulted in a scathing Fox News article saying that you drew a backlash for calling for an end to child labor laws. And it has also resulted in a less than glowing piece of feedback from Gary Johnson, the last Libertarian Party candidate for president. So I just want to jump into this one a little bit. How is legalizing child labor pro liberty?
yeah. Because I mean the fundamental idea of liberty is that people should be making individual choices and to have extremely strong private property rights. So voluntary, if you want to get it as succinct as possible, it's about voluntary association and private property rights. There is no reason that the federal government should be telling parents how they can raise their children. I absolutely, wanted to work before I was 14. I had to wait to get a job. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the police should be going around and stopping me if I want to have my 12-year-old son get a job. It's absolutely none of the government's business, right? And I think that Gary's response here is a great example of why he is so embarrassing for the Libertarian Party. I mean, Gary Johnson does not believe in private property. He doesn't. He does not believe. I don't know if he even understands libertarian philosophy. I don't know if he has any grasp of it whatsoever, or if he hides it. He's on the side of, oh, like I secretly believe these things, but I want to hide it, or maybe he doesn't understand it.
Mhm.
But there again, and I mean, I think I made this comment earlier. You're not going to find any. It's not even a left-right libertarian thing. Every school of libertarian philosopher, you can come from the left anarchist side. They're not going to say the federal government should be deciding for your local community and for your family what your children are allowed to do. So it's absolutely absurd. And with all these things, you have sort of this is another tension between libertarians is you have this sort of like these deontological type positions, which is basically like is it morally right? So, does the government have the right to interfere regardless of the outcomes, right? And I would, and I think a lot of libertarians would say no, they just don't have the right to interfere. And then you also have these sort of like consequentialist outcomes, which is like, well, what's the actual impact of doing this? Is it good or not? And I think also on consequentialist grounds, the public school system is terrible, terrible. All right, and I learned way more when I my one of my first sort of real jobs. I mean, I had a paper out and I had a job actually playing video games. But eventually, when I was like 15, I ended up working at Target,
Hmm.
and that was so educational to be a cashier at Target. And there's more that I remember about that job and more life lessons I took about that from that job than lots of classes that I was taking in high school at the same time. And I think you're going to find, and this is the funny thing is you go into that Fox News article, all of the comments are agreeing with the Libertarian Party. Like it's not, there are lots of people who are like, oh yeah, when I was 13, like yeah, to getting a job was like really valuable to me. This is something that like lots of people agree with. So why would you be supporting this sort of one size fits all for the whole country? The federal government setting a bunch of rules about who can work and who can't.
When people do oppose it, though, all the people who are saying that that allowing children to work is child abuse, they are picturing children being forced into factories and being put in tons of very dangerous situations. Isn't that what you're trying to legalize here?
Yeah, look, one of the things, and this is something that libertarians have to grapple with and figure out the answer to, and I have my own answers, is that like mo uh, I think there are more libertarians out there than the Libertarian Party is currently reaching. I think the idea that there's some set of arguments that like, oh, all of a sudden like 50% of Americans are going to actually be libertarians. I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion. I think that one of the reasons I think this kind of messaging is important is like we need to be activating the people who can actually understand it. Like there are some people for whom they've never heard it, right? And these types of people, once they hear about it, it does end up clicking with them. It does end up making sense. Um, you know, I'm at this point like I'm very skeptical that there's any kind of messaging that's going to somehow turn the majority of Americans into libertarians. But I think that it's absolutely vital that the libertarians that do exist, that have those beliefs, whether they realize them or not. And this is something that it's funny because you talk to a lot of libertarians, like vast majority of libertarians, if you talk to them about, oh, how did you become a libertarian? How did it end up like clicking for you? They'll say it could be a different author, it could be a different experience, but like you basically like the answer is almost always going to be something like once I was exposed to the ideas, it just sort of kind of clicked. And it may have taken a certain amount of time, not saying it happens in a day, maybe it happened over a series of months or years, but like it's not, I don't think that there are that many people that like were just sort of like calmly calmly reasoned into libertarianism being kind of better. I think that our sort of moral principles, whether they're biological or whether they're sort of like fixed by adulthood, I think that there's something like kind of within us. I definitely subscribe to that idea that like logic sits on top of our reason sits on top of our emotions. So sort of we have these moral impulses, these sort of fundamental emotional values about certain propositions, and then we logic on top of them. But you're not really logically reasoned into your ethical positions, right? And so libertarians take certain ethical positions that may be somewhat unpopular, but if people aren't exposed to the idea, they won't even know that they're possible, right? And so I want the Libertarian Party to really be boldly expressing that philosophy so that the people who actually can appreciate it, get to hear about it and get to understand it.
Okay, fair enough. Um, the responses that you'll also get won't just be about that it's bad for the children. Another response that people are going to give is that, well, actually, speak of the devil, we actually got it in the chat just now. Child labor grows the labor pool and suppresses the wages of the parents even further, like women working suppressed men's wages or immigrant labor suppressing native wages. We're getting a lot of those responses. Do you want to just throw out a response to that while we're here?
I don't know. What's the most succinct response? I mean, it's the lump of labor fallacy. I mean, this is something that we've known is not true for a long time. There is no lump of labor. There's when more people are working, there's more that can be done. And I mean, this is maybe the most succinct way to understand this idea is that like I don't know what is the most succinct way to introduce. Let's say, I mean, there's no shortage of. I'm like gonna just like look up lump of labor fallacy and just like repeat what Wikipedia.
Yeah, true.
Um, but yeah, like there's we're sort of like always growing the pie.
Yeah, I
There's
think you
always
said it most clearly your first response there, which is like there's more things that you can do if you add more labor, right?
yeah
Each additional piece of labor is going to unlock more possibilities for that labor to do, thus increasing the output. If that wasn't the case, then you could be each person would be far more productive in the state of nature than in a fully industrialized society. But obviously, people's labor helps each other's labor. So yeah,
yeah,
not
and
true.
one of the things, and this is it's absolutely central to a lot of these libertarian debates is like how much do we want to be engaging on these consequentialist grounds in terms of what is the outcome versus these deontological grounds versus like is it right to do. Um, I think most libertarians are probably deontological libertarians. I mean, I'm a huge fan of David Friedman and the consequentialist stuff. I actually thought that I was more consequentialist. I think I realized during lockdowns and the pandemic stuff that I'm actually a deontological libertarian because I was like, I
Interesting.
don't care. I was like, I don't care. I don't care if it works. I was like, this is offensive. This is really offensive. I was like, I don't care. So it's like if you're more consequentialist, you might say like, well,
Mm.
this is saving lives. Because the thing is, those things aren't always aligned, and this is another thing. Like we really, really want them to be. You'll find very few people who are willing to be like self-aware enough on either side to say that like well actually like I like the consequences of this even though I think some of the moral steps I take to get it are somewhat questionable and
Mm.
vice versa. If you say well oh, okay like yeah look to do the morally right thing here we might get some bad outcomes. And I think it is going to be true at least in some cases that those things aren't aligned but people basically are guaranteed to believe so it's like if you have that deontological impulse that lockdowns are wrong, what you do is you go out and you marshal all of the data that you're also consequentially correct. So of course, lockdowns killed people. It caused more addiction. Of course, they were worthless. And look, I'm inclined to believe those things. So I'm not here saying that lockdowns actually save lives. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that like those are separate sort of things. Is it
Yeah.
right to do it? And then what are the outcomes from doing it? And so,
Right.
and libertarians aren't agreed on that. Some libertarians are more concerned with outcomes. They're libertarians because they think private property and markets and so on will create better outcomes. And some
Yeah.
people are libertarians because they think like it's illegitimate for the state to do this. Full stop. And it doesn't matter even if the results are worse. It doesn't matter because it's just not right.
Right. I mean, I would definitely put myself in the consequentialist boat there, although not a strict utilitarian. Like, for example, in this situation with the lockdowns, I'm taking a look at the consequences, but I'm going to weight different people's consequences more heavily. Right. I'm if you're someone who is severely thinks that freedom just isn't a particularly important value for you. You'd rather be protected from some constrained definition of harm than be free, then to me, I'm less empathetic towards you, and therefore, in my consequentialist arithmetic, I'm going to weight your values less heavily. So I end up pretty close to a deontologist in that way. Yeah. So I mean, when you say that you're sort of deciding that you're more deontologist, are you saying that the consequentialist arguments like just don't matter, or that they do matter but less, or
No, I still like them, and I'm not. I'm not an absolutist about it either. Like, I mean, my actual ethical philosophy would probably something like a preference utilitarian, where it's like, well, how can we satisfy? But I'm not saying we're literally optimizing to satisfy as many people's as preferences as possible, because like basically, I want mine to be satisfied.
yes, exactly. Me, then my friends, then people who kind of think
Yeah.
like me and stuff like that.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I mean, so at this point, the sort of series of logic that I like, and these are some of these things are really unpopular things for libertarians to believe. I have an upcoming debate against Angela McArdle, and I think I
Oh,
might lose it for these reasons because I'm going to try to get libertarians to embrace things that they don't want to believe. But like
yeah,
my position at this point is that like libertarian like our ethical positions are real and they're valid and we deserve to be able to satisfy them the way that other people have been able to satisfy them. I think that like we have to face the fact that at this point that they are like a little bit unusual, right? And that doesn't mean that we have to be ashamed of them, but we should be looking at like other minorities. We have minority positions, literally, and I mean this, like equivalent to being gay, equivalent to other minorities throughout history. Like, and so, and look, and I actually, we don't need to get into this. I actually believe that you're born this way to some extent.
So it's like genetic. Libertarian,
Partially, yeah, I mean, because everything's
libertarian master race.
yeah, right. No, no, we're not a master's. We're just a different. It's not about us being better, right? That's what I want to. But it's about us being different, and being different is valid, and it should be accepted, and we should have the right to live the way that we want to live because that's valid. Because there's millions, tens of millions of people who believe what we believe, but those preferences, right? To say like, I mean, look, lockdowns just have. How you live in New Zealand, right? How
Yes.
Yeah, how sorry, I'm not like trying to dox you or anything. I mean, I assume if you
No,
assume you
no,
live in
I am the most doxed person in the world. Like I
yeah,
at one point said my address on a stream years ago, so
yeah,
like
okay,
don't worry about it.
okay.
People are going to look for that stream now.
How you guys had some of the harshest lockdowns. How popular are the lockdowns? Your government's popular right now, is it not?
Incredibly, the popularity of our government was actually low before the lockdowns. Then they instituted lockdowns, and it went up.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like, maybe at some point in time you could have been like, well, if people actually experience tyranny, then they'll wake up. No, it just happened. It just happened to everyone. And did people all of a sudden activate and become libertarians? Some people did. That minority of people, right? So
Yeah,
it did activate some people who weren't activated before who
that's
realized,
true.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Our
But
libertarian equivalent party ACT did actually grow, just not as much as the socialists grew. The
right.
Labour Party.
Right. So this is so we have to grapple with this to like at a certain point, it becomes delusional to think that, oh, let's just like repackage your argument. Let's repackage your argument. Let's say it this way. Like you've been selling the same thing for the Libertarian Party has existed for longer than Joe Biden has been in office, right? It's something that's they've been trying it for a long time. Um, uh, even Ron Paul, generally regarded as like the best libertarian messenger, one still occasionally hid some aspects of liberty or wasn't full throated about them, and then two, what 10% of the population he got in America, if that, excited about him, right?
Mm.
Right, because like 20% of the Republican Party would be like one tenth
Yeah,
of right of people that are politically engaged. I mean, so it's like what is it? There's going to be someone who's going to convince 5 times as many people as Ron Paul did.
right.
So it's like I'm I find that very unlikely. And so now you have to say, well, where do we go from here? If we genuinely believe these things, but majority of people aren't,
Mhm.
you know, where do we go from here?
Well,
And
that's a good
that's
question. Where do we go
yeah.
from here? Because where you're going from here is, among other things, you've joined a political party. So that would seem counterproductive if you think that it's a futile effort. So do you have a justification for
Well,
that?
right. Yeah, yeah. So one is we need to find each other that genuinely have these positions, right? The people who genuinely understand and believe libertarianism. And some people need to be activated. So I'm not saying just find the people who already believe it. Through some of the things that that we say and we do, we can introduce more people to it. But we need to have that network of people who do genuinely understand and appreciate libertarianism. And then my position is that we need to physically concentrate. We need to effectively establish a libertarian homeland, right? That's a big part of why I'm involved in the Free State project. But like no, like we literally should be taking the template of other oppressed peoples who eventually found a way to be free. And that's like they generally didn't apologize for what they believed. They said that we have the right to believe these things. We're individuals. We're valid. We deserve it, and we'll fight for it, right? And that's what I think libertarians should do. I've got fakeritarians coming after me.
Right,
And one of the things,
fakeitarians just just for people who aren't aware, fakeitarians are some group of libertarians who
I
spend most of their time, if not all of their time, just ragging on the more popular libertarians, saying that they are harmful to the movement due to, I don't know, racism and sexism and other things that leftists generally call people. Sorry, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
mean they're mostly. I think a decent chunk of them are socialists from what from what I can tell, in the sense that they want there to be this sort of like resource redistribution type things. Um, but the one of the things I said is like libertarians are more oppressed than any other minority, and I think this is actually a true fact. I'm not even
Mm,
trolling when I say this. Like, and the as an impact of like again here like when you're a libertarian, when you have these impulses, like the government doing these things, it feels terrible, right? Right? Other people don't experience it that way, right? You literally are having a group of people that are suffering, right? No one, having that libertarian psychology means that you did find the events of the last year to be far more hurtful and damaging and terrible than other people did. Other people said this is fine, this is normal, right? And so we have this minority preference that's not being respected, that's not being recognized. And I'm not trying to take this language of the oppressed, like I want to be a fighter, but like I think this is actually true. This is actually what happened. And so this idea that like, oh, like we're all the same, I
mm,
think that it's not true. And
yeah,
libertarian subjective experience of government is different. I've like I mean I don't know I've even doing something like like taxes, right? Like I actually find it like emotionally stressing.
it's
Like I
insulting.
don't, yeah, yes. It's like it feels like it's like feeling like having someone. And I know you're paying them all the time, but like the actual act of doing them,
Mm,
it feels so bad to me. Like I actually feel I know the gun's not in the room, but it feels like that to me. It feels like this, that I'm in this that there's this force that's like forcing me, that's being like violent and harmful, and it's like, and most people pay taxes and they just think it's normal, right?
right.
And so yeah, I do think that there are similarities, and so yeah, I think that I do think the best thing libertarians can do is to concentrate. I think libertarians in America should absolutely move to New Hampshire. I think that it's our best hope. But I think that even if you don't believe in that, we have to sort of recognize that some of these things are true, and figure out where you go, where you go from here.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about it like that, the emotional difference between people, which we're talking about, but it is true. Like when I in discussions when I talk to people about the lockdowns, it to some degree, I'm focusing on the logic of the argument, and here's why I think the lockdowns will have bad consequences. But definitely, emotionally, what I'm feeling is, how the hell am I actually having to argue this? Why do you think it's okay for the government to lock us in our houses? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do agree that it is an emotional difference, and you're probably right that we can't convince most people. Where we go from there is an open question. But yeah, that's I hadn't heard that expressed that way before. Um, I do want to move on to
Another thing
something.
that,
Oh yeah, sorry.
yeah, just one other
No.
thing to say is that from that consequential side, by being like, and this is another aspect, like, 'cause I think libertarians tend to be more independent minded, and they're like, I'm going to think things through for myself. Maybe they're not all doing that. They at least believe that they're. But like, I think a lot of people are even less that way, and the way that they take their positions is like kind of like averaging out the perspective of what's being said. So this sort of like Overton window type argument of like, by being really, really forcefully on one side, I do think we have the ability to sort of at least drag or move the needle a
Mm,
little bit towards liberty. So and so that is another reason that I think the Libertarian Party should be, like very unequivocally, pro liberty.
okay. All right. So I want to move on to some of these other tweets, but first, we've got quite a bit in the chat that I just want to quickly address. First of all, I've had a $25 super chat from Troy McClure. Thank you very much, sir. Is this how you do the good capitalism? Yeah, it is. Capitalism is just giving me money. That is the definition. Um, so the next thing that I wanted to address is a bunch of people are still arguing like the child labor thing. When you are a libertarian and you have these impulses to employ children and the government tells you you can't, it really hurts your feelings, sad face. Look, I want to personally defend the child labor thing from my side. Everyone agrees with child labor. The people doing the work, right? Most people would say you'd send your kids to school. You're still telling them to do work, right? They're still doing work. The difference is that that's forced, like the government forces you to go to school. Second, the only real difference here is whether or not you can pay them for that, right? So if you pay your kids to do their homework like some parents do, that's now child labor. Where the exact difference comes in here is kind of beyond me. Now, you might say that's because you're going to send your kids to the factory into really dangerous conditions. Yeah, you shouldn't put your kid into dangerous conditions whether they're being paid or not. That has nothing to do with child labor. That's just don't endanger your child. So, yeah, and where this actually leads isn't stopping kids from being pushed into factories. What it results in is actually the many real cases of cops shutting down kids' lemonade stands, which is insane, but happens. So anyway, I just wanted to rant on that as well, seeing as how you got the opportunity to and still doing it.
Well, there's another thing in there. So you talked about like, well, now you're introducing money. This is another one where libertarians are different from people, right? Ask libertarians, are they okay with kidneys being sold, right?
Yes.
Well, of course. Markets work. More money will increase the supply of kidneys. People own their bodies. They have the right to sell their kidney if they want to. Who are you to sell? Okay.
Yeah, I like the. I think Brian Kaplan said he said it about economists. He said, well, I mean, you've got a bunch of people over here who have money and want kidneys. A bunch of people over here who have kidneys and want money. Seems like that's a solution.
Right. So people like you and me, I love Brian Kaplan. But this isn't a very uncommon position to hold, right? Like we have to simultaneously have self-awareness and recognize that like most people, the vast majority of people find the idea of introducing money into kidney transfer to be absolutely morally abhorrent. Okay. Like, why is that? Right. And this again gets the and I'm not claiming to have some precise vision of like what all these differences are, but it's clear that there are some differences. If people make that argument, people don't buy it. And it's not a matter of people being like, quote, too dumb. Brian Kaplan could go and stand in front of, I don't know, maybe Harvard's not the best school to talk about anymore. It's like, the smartest kids. But, whatever college you want to pick where the kids are, 95th, 99th percentile. And he could make those arguments, right? And he could be very cogent. And at the end, people would still say, well, I don't know. I just don't think people should be paid money for kidneys, right? And it is like, and some, I'm not saying there aren't like some people who would change their mind, but the vast majority of people would not. So,
yeah, okay. I think we should jump into some more of these tweets because some of them are really quite juicy. So I'm gonna try to find the one that okay. So this is probably the one that I first noticed that got an enormous amount of feedback. That is, all Republicans want to do about wokeness is whine. Libertarians have solutions. And it's the first item here that really catches people's eye. Repeal the Civil Rights Act. Eliminate disparate impact regulations, end affirmative action, and cease federal and state school funding. So, repeal the Civil Rights Act. Didn't the Civil Rights Act have libertarian results, like ending Jim Crow laws and things like that? Why would a libertarian want to repeal the Civil Rights Act?
Yeah, so this is actually my favorite of all the tweets, probably because this one is entirely serious and it's giving an actual like real answer. Like this is not a troll tweet at all. And I guess it's a troll tweet in the sense that like I know that people are going to be mad about it, right? But in the sense that it's like absolutely this is like straightforward 100% libertarian position, and it's actually policy correct that this is what the Republicans or anyone who's against anti-wokeness, I don't mean to say that anti-wokeness is just a Republican issue, but anyone who's opposed to wokeness, these are absolutely the policy positions that you need. We followed up with, and you read Kaplan, so you've probably seen this, but there's the Brian Kaplan piece, Deregulate Discrimination, and then there's this Richard Hanania piece, which was really the impetus for all of this. and it's that woke institutions are just civil rights law. This is a really good Substack piece. In fact, all of Hania's pieces in this series are worth reading.
Yeah, I have a
Um,
link to that actually. I'll post that in the description.
but yeah, like if you are opposed to wokeness, it is absolutely propped up by the federal government. And the point that Hania makes in this piece is that the rules around disparate impact basically created most of the sort of like HR, diversity training, all of this stuff, which morphed into wokeness. This was all ultimately created by the federal government. I mean, even the category Asian American Pacific Islanders, like that was not that category was created by the federal government. It was not used until the federal government created that category and basically turned it into something. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
there's
I will say that that is a weird combination being from New Zealand where you have a lot of Pacific Islanders. They would not want to be lumped in with Asians.
Yeah, the federal government made that category up. And it made it up so that it could track people in various racial categories and ensure that different races had equivalent outcomes. And this is another reason why the Civil Rights Act has these disparate outcome things where things of different impact by race, assuming that all races have they're all equal in every way in mean ability and whatever. And so you have cases like Griggs versus Duke Power, which is a Supreme Court case that said if you give IQ tests to your employees, you can be, that's potentially illegal, and it was illegal in this case because every race wasn't scoring the same on the IQ test. So testing people for intelligence is illegal when you're hiring people. That is an insane outcome, and the root of that outcome is the Civil Rights Act. So this is absolutely something that libertarians need to care about, and anyone who's anti-woke, these are the actual policy positions. You have to get rid of affirmative action. You have to get rid of disparate impact. You have to make it so that employee hiring is an entirely private decision. It's at the root of all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you know much about how like credit systems work in the U.S. But the credit systems are garbage, and there's very little innovation in terms of like how they're assessing someone's repayment possibility, and the way that all loans work. Like there's a reason that it's all become systemized and all using the same a very similar scoring system and so on. And it's because this is how you avoid getting in trouble with the federal government. If banks loan money and they loan money in a way that is racially disparate for any number of reasons, that you can come up with an outcome that's racially disparate where they weren't trying to discriminate against people. But when you have a law that says all disparate outcomes are to be judged as proof of racial bias, right? Which is effectively what these laws are saying. Those are disastrous. And it affects an incredible amount of industries, and I think it's a very underappreciated problem.
Okay. All right. So that is the defense of repealing the Civil Rights Act. I did notice in a later tweet, you did seem to pare it down to a couple of articles within the Civil Rights Act. Is that you walking it back a bit, or is that just you focusing on the more important parts?
I'm trying to make sure that I'm representing the Libertarian Party correctly. I think those are the two that pretty much are straight against the Libertarian platform. I personally would be okay with removing some of the other ones, just because again, like even in the federal government side, like if you say that quote the federal government can't discriminate, again, like I think the federal government should be allowed to give intelligence tests. I don't think the federal government should be like counting up the race and gender of everyone that works there and making them all the same. So I'm personally fine with repealing the ones that restrict the government as well. It's not clear to me whether that would actually be the libertarian, like official Libertarian Party position. So I want to, I do want to represent the party correctly. Like my intent is not to somehow go against the party. Like there are a couple of things where I might quibble with the Libertarian platform, but I'm not going to go against the platform, right? So everything that I want to say under the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire handle, I want it to be 100% consistent
Right.
with the official platform,
Well,
which Gary Johnson contradicted, by the way. People.
well, actually, yeah, you bring up Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
So I do want to actually talk a little bit more about the interaction with him, because a lot of people would say that, Gary Johnson was the most successful libertarian presidential candidate, right? He got the largest portion of votes in
Yes.
2016. So potentially he knows something about messaging,
Yeah.
and
Look, Gary Johnson could probably get even more votes running on a platform of basic income, nationalizing the tech companies, and all kind. There are all kinds of things that are popular. If the goal is just to endorse popular positions, or we can do market research, and we can just figure out like what are the positions that are not being said. I think actually the sort of like right populist, there's a huge hole, and so we as libertarians, right, we could talk about how like, and by the way, right populism is not pro-capitalism, right? So we can talk about restricting the major corporations. We can there's all kinds of social conservative positions that are popular. So we can endorse all these things, right? We'll get more votes.
yeah.
And if you think that that's dumb, now you understand why running Gary Johnson is dumb. Like Gary Johnson is not a libertarian. He doesn't endorse libertarian positions. He's a Republican that wants to legalize weed. Okay, he contradicts libertarian libertarian philosophical positions on the regular. He cannot actually articulate any of the thinkers and people that are why people care about being a libertarian. Yeah, like I mean, I think there's also an aspect where he got votes because Trump was unique, and a lot of people thought he was like uniquely bad, and wanted to stay away from him while still not voting for the Democrats.
Right.
But look, part of why he did is he's the least libertarian that the libertarians have ever run. That's a weird sentence, but he is right. And so yeah, okay, we can just keep running people who are less and less libertarian and maybe get even more votes. Why is that a bad idea? I don't know, because I want the Libertarian Party to actually represent libertarianism. I don't care. Like I don't. To me, I think it's incredibly naive to think that the Libertarian Party is going to somehow win the presidency. And so it's like, if we're not going to fucking win, why are we also hiding what we believe to get an extra percent? I don't understand it if that's the trade-off. And I would like to believe that we can get a higher percent by also being unequivocal. But if that's the trade-off, if you're telling me that I have to run Gary Johnson to get an extra percent, no way. I'm not interested.
So you did seem to tone down your messaging at one point recently, which I'm sure everyone was happy to see. And I just want to read some of the nicer tweets that we've had from you. So we've got police that abuse their authority should say they're sorry. That's very nice. Very polite. They should. Exactly.
Yeah.
Taxation is impolite. I've always thought so. It's not on, really. Wars aren't nice and should be avoided. See, generally good rule of thumb. And finally, initiating force is a no-no, which I would tend to agree with. Is that so hard? Can't you just keep your messaging nice and friendly rather than these bombastic statements?
One is those were only popular because of the right. I think if we had just tweeted that before the controversy, I'm not sure that it would have gotten that it would have done as well. Yeah, look, even I mean I could pull it up. I bet those tweets were probably seen by not even 1/100th as much as the ones like the civil rights one or the child labor one. But no, we can't. Well, look, we don't. It's not about everything being this, really aggressive statement. And something that we also want to make sure that we're doing is anytime we take these positions that we know might be unpopular, that we're backing it up with the sort of the serious, the sort of serious answer and the serious reason why, why this is actually, true.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so the next one I wanted to introduce is it's something where you've actually got some pushback from some people on libertarian grounds saying that this is actually unlibertarian, which is this one. Free markets work, posted with a picture of 10 packs of COVID-19 vaccination record card blank. The implication here being that people are taking that you should buy one of these packs and use it to defraud companies that you are going to visit. You should go into their business despite they're not consenting to you going in without a vaccination. And that violates the NAP, that is fraud, and it is unlibertarian. What is your response to that?
Yeah, so I think people are, I mean, this tweet is sort of like a Rorschach test in terms of you can read all kinds of things into it that you want to read into it that may or may not be explicitly being said. The first is, I mean, the first and most straightforward implication is that like, no, like free markets literally work. Like this is the free market coming up with it. You can think that it's a bad thing, right? But it is nonetheless an example of a free market providing something that people want.
Right.
In terms of using them to defraud, I do not think it's fraud to use them against the government. So I think it's
Right.
absolutely not fraud to lie to the government.
Mhm.
I wouldn't do that, but I think if someone else wants to do that, I mean I'm not going to get mad at them. Um,
Right. Yeah,
and
I would never do that. I mean, to be fair, you
yeah,
wouldn't say it if you would do that, but
uh, yeah. No, I've actually just I've tried very hard to be very honest with the government because I'm trying to. I don't want to get into this on the show, but I'm trying to win some other things I've got going on with the government. So I'm like very scrupulous in terms of being honest with the government.
okay.
But and now in terms of using them in a private way, I think that's a lot more contentious. I would be on the fence about it myself, and I think it would be kind of contextual in terms of in terms of why it's happening and what's driving it and so on. I mean, I personally think that the sort of calls for vaccination are kind of crazy
Mhm.
because if the vaccine works, which I think it does, then the people who have it are protected. So it should really be regarded as more of a personal choice if people don't want to if people don't want to get it. And then so it's like, how do you see it? Is it so? Like, I'll just talk about some possible ways you can see it. So you're using the vaccine.
Sure.
So here's you could see it as a wrong thing, but you could see it as like just like a white lie. Like this person has some crazy belief, and like I'm just placating them, right? So I'm lying, but it's a lie. It's a harmless lie, right? And
Right.
so, well, how do you feel about white lies? Are white lies anti-libertarian? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. If they are anti-libertarian, they're only like just a little bit anti-libertarian. So you can see it like that. You could see it as completely consistent with libertarianism, right? So you could say that, well, none of this would be happening without the government. We don't really know what would be happening without the government, and so anything that's in this space, it's actually the government behind it. I actually
That
think that's a little bit, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it
I
seems
think
a
it's a
little bit
sketchy
dubious to
argument.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of libertarians make that argument. So I'll say actually I don't. I would reject that argument. Um, but a lot of libertarians do make it. Now I think there may be times where that's true. Like there are, like if I don't think that, for example, an airline is private, right? Like if I have to lie to, if I have to, if I had to, if I was in a situation where I needed to show an airline a fake vaccination card, I would not. To me, the airlines are so controlled by the federal government. There's no free market in planes. It's an industry that may be private, but it is so coupled with the government that there's
Mhm.
not an ability for a service provider to compete and provide for the minority status. So it
That's
wouldn't
true.
offend me.
I also
Yeah.
think in that situation, it's probably the case that it's not just, the vaccinations and the vaccination cards are recommended by the government. With the airline, it's almost certainly going to be that the government will require the airlines to check your vaccination status. So
Yeah.
in that
Yeah. But this
situation, you aren't actually confident that that is in fact what the private owners want.
Yes, and this is what I mean is that I think it does get contextual. Like, all right, if you're talking about like the local business owner, who says like, yeah, this is my store, I think that would be like, I think it would be straight up fraud to be giving him one of those cards. So I think it's a fairly complicated situation. I'm probably on the side that it's fraud. It's fraud most of the time.
Right.
Um, so, But it's, it's just pointing out like the lowest level of tweets. It's just pointing out that hey, this is something that's going to happen, and this is a market outcome. So
Okay, that is true. I think we're pretty much on the same page about that. I think it generally would be fraud if you use it for a private business. As much as I think that personally, the private business should not require your proof of vaccination. I mean, if there was, even if I were vaccinated, I would probably boycott a private business for requiring vaccinations from all patrons because I think that is exerting unnecessary control over people. But yeah, I do agree that I think it's probably fraud. So that pretty much gets to the end of the tweets that I wanted you to address. I instead just wanted to go into the sort of the general libertarian strategy thing, which I guess we've touched on quite a bit. But the common criticism, obviously, is that you're turning people off with sort of a hostile style. The response that you tend to give is, of course, as you have then and as you have on Twitter, that hey, these controversial takes get an enormous amount of traffic. Like the impressions are up, the page visits are up, the mentions are up, the follows are up. It's just gone up like crazy. That being said, I get that you want to. You're realistic. You're only trying to convert people who are sympathetic to these ideas anyway. You don't think it's going to be everyone. And you're just trying to reach everyone in that way. But nonetheless, surely there's the marginal person, right? The person who, given a good introduction to libertarianism, would become one, and given a bad introduction to libertarianism, would not. Are you not alienating that marginal potential libertarian with this kind of messaging, where one that's a little bit more easing them into it would not
yeah,
be so?
yeah. So I mean, I definitely think that there are trade-offs. I think that for the most part, the Libertarian Party has um, has been ignored. Right? So I would move the trade-off towards like I'm fine with more people. Like, how many people are you okay with disliking libertarianism who otherwise like might not have heard of it or care about it to get another libertarian, right?
Right.
And I also think this is another actually thing that I think that people get wrong in terms of how social change happens and why I think you do want the unequivocal messaging is like you need people who are absolute rocks in um, in their positions to sort of drag people along. So if you get someone in any given election who's at the margin uh, to vote for the party, but they don't actually understand the. Now, some of these people, maybe you get them at the margin and they later become the unequivocal positions. But what you really want to be selecting for as much as possible is finding those people who can be and are willing to be um, strong in the libertarian positions and can articulate them well, not just be strong, but like be good at it, right?
Yeah.
And so this means like in other words, like this is like libertarians tend. I do think libertarians. I think there's evidence for this. Libertarians tend to be more disagreeable, and
Really?
in the sort of in the big five personality sense. That is that they're more willing to take positions that other people disagree with. Now, in this case, I don't think that this is necessarily about the people that are disagreeable are more libertarian. It's that if you want to take, if you are going to take any minority political position, you have to be, and take it loudly, you have to be somewhat disagreeable, right? And so I would bet that communists and other people are also more disagreeable in sort of a traditional, big five psychological profile, where disagreeable is one of the primary character attributes. And so, but that's actually what we want, right? Like we want to be finding as many people as possible that will equivocate, that will advocate for liberty, and that aren't going to hide it, that are going to be able to do it consistently. Because a lot of people's psychology is to be centrist, right? I'll split the difference. I'll average the things that I'm hearing. and I'm not even making fun of them, okay? I think it's a very reasonable strategy for for getting along in life. But because a lot of people are not actually, quote, like thinking things through, and they're more, sort of taking the temperature, or taking the average. We need to be getting as many people as possible so that it feels like there's more of us than there are, and so that we're making that voice and that perspective heard. And so if we're optimizing for these people at the margin, but losing the people um, who are sort of unequivocal about it, I'm not sure that that's a good trade-off either.
Okay. All right, fair enough. No, I can see where you're coming from. If I do want to try to keep this under an hour, so we're going to start wrapping it up. Because I find that as soon as there's a one at the start of a stream, people don't
No one
click
wants
it.
to watch it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah, it's got 59 minutes. People will click
Yeah.
that. 1 hour? Nope, not happening.
I don't have time for
Um,
that. Yeah.
so I just wanted to say, like, is there anything that you think we've missed that you wanted to say about the Twitter account? Anyone you wanted to respond to? Any sort of topic that you think we should have hit?
I mean, I wouldn't exactly. Don't mistake this exactly for a call for unity, but I think, although I mean, I guess I'm for it. But that like one of the things that I think the left does very good is it doesn't punch left. You
Mm,
can't really get criticized for being too left, and so I think that that's generally a successful attitude to have. So like, let's not criticize people for being too libertarian.
right.
If you think that someone being too unequivocally libertarian is like a bad strategy, or whatever, I mean, you can not amplify it, or you can put out your own message that's different. But I think that like, you know, our enemies are like definitely those people that that oppose liberty, and we should be keeping as much of our fire in that direction. Like I think what Gary Johnson did is like I think it's very bad. I think it's very perform. And even if you agree with him that like that message shouldn't be getting said, like the message that other libertarians should be putting out is like, okay, put out the better form of it, right? Because there's no way. I mean, I would be surprised if you actually pressed Gary Johnson what he and by the way, someone I'm pretty sure prodded Gary Johnson to give that response. Gary Johnson does not use Twitter regularly, right? So I don't think he was like just on Twitter and saw that and replied. Because if you look at how many tweets and replies he does, he's not on. He's rarely on Twitter. So I actually think someone sent him a message and told Gary to go to
Mm,
go reply to that. But yeah, like that's not okay. Like Gary needs to, if Gary wants to be a leader in the party, like okay, give it the Gary Johnson way, okay? But surely you're not supportive of the existing federal laws around labor. Right? Maybe you don't want to abolish all of them, okay? You can give your watered down answer, like actually what libertarians believe is this. But to say that it's just wrong, it's not wrong. It's not remotely wrong. And Gary's answer may be popular with people in general. I don't believe for a second if you polled people, unless the Libertarian Party's gone up more off the rails than I realized, but I would find it hard to believe that if I polled people at the Libertarian National Convention, that they'd say we love the existing state of federal labor laws. Right,
right.
it would blow my mind, right?
Well, I mean,
So,
Gary Johnson doesn't love the existing state of federal labor laws. It's the specific labor law I think he's defending.
well, which one? I mean, did Gary
The
Johnson actually think that 13-year-old children shouldn't be allowed to work? Or that 14-year-old children should can't work more than this amount of hours and you have to do all this paperwork and there's all these special rules for them? Like, I mean, maybe, I don't know. Gary, he's a regular disappointment, so maybe he does actually believe those things, but I would actually be surprised if he does.
Okay. Yeah, I probably pretty much agree with that. Hey, I think we can kill it there. This has been an amazing interview. I've really enjoyed it, and I actually learned quite a lot. So, people can watch the edited down version. If you're going to share this, wait like a day or so for me to get an edited down version, which will be exclusive to Odyssey, and share that instead, because it'll be much more watchable, and people will actually actually get through it. It'll miss all of the technical difficulties and hemming and hawing that inevitably happen during these streams. So thank you very much again, Jeremy, for coming on. And also, everyone, go follow him both on his actual Twitter account, Jeremy Kaufman, and also the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire official Twitter account. I'm sure we've got plenty of good stuff coming up soon on that.
Yes,
Cool.
and come and visit us in New Hampshire. Check out the Free State Project as well. Thanks.